Welcome to Onboard, a Factorial HR podcast. I'm Kylie, your host. In Onboard, we speak with HR experts and leaders and deep dive into crucial conversations and HR topics. Today, we have the privilege of speaking with Tiffany Castagno, CEO and founder of CEPHR LLC. Thank you so much for being with us today, Tiffany. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Thanks for this opportunity, Kylie. I've enjoyed chatting with you and getting to know you and just love Factorial. I love our collaborations. They're always a good time. As Kylie said, I'm Tiffany Castagno and I am CEO and founder of CEPHR LLC. I always like to add in that CEPHR is an acronym for Cultivating the Evolution of Professional HR. And that is because I love helping people design deliberate cultures. So I work with small to medium enterprises, really helping them support building infrastructure, enhance their infrastructure. So that might be policies. I know we're going to get into that today. It might be helping them out with a handbook for the first time or building upon the handbook that they have. It might be performance management, strategic planning, change management. There's so many things that are wrapped up into there. And what I love about it most is that I get to impact people and I get to work with leadership and help build leadership capabilities. So I'm based in Pittsburgh. I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So been in the Burgh, as they call it, for 4 years. And my husband and I have been exploring and we love to travel. So I'm really excited to get into this topic today.
Awesome, Tiffany. Well, it's so good to have you here, and well, you know it all. Your work covers every little area that we like to explore here at Factorial HR and learn more about. So we're going to be talking about unlimited PTO. And I think this is something that is interesting to a lot of people because it's becoming more and more popular, right? It's a benefit that everyone wants, but sometimes we think, is it really unlimited or is there something we're missing? Because you imagine, is it possible to have unlimited PTO, right? So what do you think, Tiffany? Is this something that is growing, is becoming more and more popular with companies today?
It's such an interesting question, and I feel like it's a little bit nuanced. I feel like it is growing in popularity. I feel that it's suited to certain industries better. We often find that in tech, it's super common. The tech company I worked at before I launched CEPHR had unlimited PTO. And so I think there are some important dynamics that we'll probably get into today around that. I don't think that it ever can be unlimited because at some point, unless you allow somebody to never be able to work, if they said, I want to, there has to be parameters, right? Like if you wanted to be off every single day, or, is it feasible to be off every single Friday? Are there deliverables that are due? Is there, a big grand opening of another location that you can't be gone? So there definitely are some nuances, but I've seen companies get really creative to still allow people lots of time off. So
yeah. Yeah, and so you mentioned how a lot of tech companies, in your experience, you've seen this happen in a lot of tech companies. What other types of industries are we seeing this happen in?
Yeah, I think your small companies or startups in particular, you'll see that. I think if you are a new founder or a solopreneur such as myself, and maybe you have a couple of contractors, it can be really tempting and easy to say, okay, well, I am my own boss who's really governing me. In the case of a nonprofit, you usually have a board, and some for-profits do as well. But I think also, you have to kind of self-manage too. I find my mom was joking with me and saying, oh, well, didn't you just get back from a vacation when I went on my last vacation? And I said, well, I probably take as much time off as I used to when I was granted a certain bucket of vacation. And she's like, well, it feels like more. It feels like you've taken like a month off recently. And I can do that, right? But we have to be self-managed. And there are times when I don't take time off or when I'm taking only the time off that my husband gets because we travel together. So there are a lot of different components, but I think, tech, we see it, startups, I think a little bit it's becoming more, I've seen some in the finance space, but due to it's a highly regulated industry. So I think sometimes that's a struggle, but, and I think people who are watching their competitors, especially now in the way the market is, people want to be marketable and attractive to employees, but My caution there is, as it is with everything, and I just had this conversation last week, like, to not always do things just because your competitor is doing it, it might not be the right thing for you and your employees, especially if you're finding they're not taking the time off anyway. That tells me there's a different type of intervention needed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting because that's one thing that I've read a little bit about how a lot of companies that do offer unlimited PTO, they see a decline in time off in their employees. So like you just said, there might be another thing that they need to sort through. Maybe it's not the time off that they needed to adjust. What are maybe some worries that HR might have when that happens, if people are not taking that time off?
Yeah, I mean, burnout's a real thing. Stress, and my goodness, over these last 2+ years, it has been extremely stressful for people. The mental health crisis has just skyrocketed. And so if people don't feel like they're able to take the time off, even if the company sets that, how you do that, there's a whole change management piece that comes with that, and you should have a strong communication plan. People should know when and how, and are there still limits on that? And is it, I've seen in some cases unlimited vacation, but then people might still have like a sick bucket. Or you'll have companies who have the typical vacation, sick, and other like personal time off. Or you'll see unlimited PTO, which is everything, right? Which is really more equitable because I'll use myself as an example. I don't have children. And so I don't have to worry about a sick child that, now has to be picked up from daycare, but I had a sick pet and we had to put her down, and I can't imagine not being able to have that flexibility. So even when you look at, a woman who is pregnant, she's going to take maternity leave. Well, there are other parents who may adopt or who may not, who identify as women in a different manner. They may have a same-sex partner, but that doesn't mean they can't start a family. And so even how you look at time off under a parental leave or a family leave, what you call that, makes a difference. But I think, some of the concerns are around, people perceiving that inequity, right? Like, oh, well, my colleague took time off, or there's always the dynamics of the people with the children, the people who do not have children, and well, I don't have kids, I don't get to just take time off, right? So the culture that we set and how we, we don't want to pit people against each other or make it feel like it's unbalanced. And so that's been a huge concern for HR as we're looking to help, work with leadership and C-suite and try to really, understand and listen to the employees and balancing out engagement surveys. What are people actually telling you? Taking the pulse of your organization is going to help you shape those policies. And I frankly think that's underrated, but stress and burnout are a big thing. And if people don't feel like they can take the time off, or they feel like they're going to lose something by that. I mean, women are a classic example, especially right now. We still aren't paid what men are paid, and people fear losing out on opportunities for deciding to stay home for a little while with their kids. Or what is the market going to say when I try to step back into it after I haven't worked for a few years because I decided I wanted to raise my child? There's so many complications that organizations really need to look at from just a people perspective.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. And kind of going back to what you were saying about taking that time off, maybe someone who is not the traditional family or who doesn't have kids and doesn't fit in that box that has been kind of created. Do you think, for example, policies like unlimited PTO creates that inclusivity to allow people to feel comfortable and confident to take time off, or feel like it is okay for them to do it if they're not the traditional parent or taking time off for their kids, for example?
Yeah, I think for folks who don't have children, or they don't, I consider myself and my husband a family. We do have a cat, so we're a little family. We're still a family unit. Of
course.
And so that's also personal to us. But we love to travel. We don't have children, so I want to take my time off to travel or just to decompress because I've worked really hard throughout the year. And so I think if you do it right, people do perceive it as inclusive, and they feel like they can take time off for different things that they value. Of course, if you have a family, you're going to hopefully put them first and feel like you have that opportunity with your employer to be able to do that, versus, feeling like, oh, well, I can't really take that time off. So typically, if it's rolled out correctly and if people understand how to use it and when to use it and what the impacts of timing of that are to use it, because probably if there's a big deliverable coming up, you probably can take 2 weeks off. The workflow, even establishing a workflow as an organization and as a team really helps with that. So I think it can be inclusive, but if you don't do it right, it can be seen as something that's not equitable.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's important for companies to have that structure, especially with a benefit that's so open-ended. There's nothing, if they don't have that structure, it just seems like people can take how much time they want. They can leave for a month. They don't have to worry about this or that. So it's really necessary to have that structure. And with any companies that you have had experience with, how can they create that structure around a benefit like that? Is there anything in particular that they can do to ensure that?
Yeah, I always come back to, your mission, vision, and values. And people hear me talk about that ad nauseum because it's very important. If we say we are a certain thing, I'm a small business myself. And so helping my clients do that, I've gone through these very exercises within my own company, even though I'm a solopreneur with a couple contractors and soon to be an intern. Yay, so excited for her to come. But we want to be able to set policies not only for now, but for the future. So if we can be future facing, that's really helpful. But we have to recognize that these things are dynamic. We can't be doing the same thing that we were doing 7 years ago. And we also have to understand that unlimited PTO may not work for your company. It may not be something that is a perk that your employees want, or maybe they think they want it because they heard their friend, has that at work, but they don't understand the nuances of the industry or how that really doesn't apply to us as an organization because, right? It's explaining the why. So connecting it into the mission, vision, values, making sure that you're deliberately setting culture and that there are policies around it, that you talk to people and you don't just send it out, that you allow space for questions, and that it's really based on the employee population you have. Some companies have very young employees as a population of their employees. Others may have more who are retiring. So people, and we're all unique in our own right. Our family structures look different. Our cultures are different. And some cultures, it's very common to take a month off for a wedding. Is your culture set up to allow that? What is the composition of your employees and what do they value? This is where we have to, when we talk about culture, you have to assess whether that's a survey through one-on-ones, performance reviews, how are you checking in on folks and understanding what they value? Because that tells you how you should set policies. It shouldn't just be HR. It shouldn't just be leadership. And hopefully those two pieces of the organization are working together too to partner on it. But you want it to be reflective of the company and the employees that you have. If I don't value team building, which hopefully everybody does, but to some companies, they think that's like, oh, get out the ping pong table and let's go, have pizza and beer. Not everybody values that. So there are different things that you can be doing to be intentional about that. Understanding what hobbies your employees have when they're off is really critical. It's okay to ask employees and help them, let them help shape the culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all when it comes to these types of things, and these types of benefits and policies can really shape the culture, but also depending on what type of business it is it a small business or a tech company or something else? So that's crucial information for companies to take a look at. So let's say, for example, maybe there's an employee who feels like they really need a reset every, let's say, every month, well, let's say every 3 months or something. They need a 1 to 2 week reset. They need to disconnect. They need to, I don't know, just live their lives. Do you think that could be harmful or beneficial for a company? Let's say the ideal company that unlimited PTO works for them. Could that be a good thing for the company and the employees as well?
I think so. I think it's how you manage it and how you structure it, and certainly how you communicate it. So if you say it's unlimited and people are like, sweet, I'm gonna just take all the time off in the world. I haven't talked to my colleagues. I'm not, and I've seen this happen where I was having a conversation recently where it was more like, tell, don't ask. You haven't gone through a formal approval process with your manager. There's still always a process. So establish a process, whether that's a policy, a procedure. There has to be some standard operating procedure in order for employees to know what's expected of them. And it's not to be like thumb on them micromanaging. Employees want that, and I try to convince businesses of this all the time, because often people feel like, well, that's too much bureaucracy to put in all these policies. People are going to think this, and I'm like, well, they're going to come and ask anyway, whether they're asking you or they're going to ask HR. They need that structure. So if your employee wants to take a couple weeks off every quarter, are you okay with that? What are the deliverables? What's the workflow? And have you set them up for success? Does the rest of the team know? And are they going to be pulling a whole bunch of extra weight? And how do they feel about that? That's a rich opportunity to work as a team and to really demonstrate some good leadership skills to say, all right, this is a culture that we want to create. Even if the rest of the organization might be doing a little bit something different with how they structure it, sometimes we see that consistency is key. But consistency might mean that your department, it just doesn't work because you're sales, you're out there in front of folks, and maybe that doesn't work for you. But making sure that the team has an opportunity to feel like they can shape that too, and that it's not going to impact them in a negative way. If you get buy-in, which we always should, then, then people feel like, okay, this feels like it was designed for me, and that feels good to people, versus, oh, here's the organization, they changed this again, they didn't even ask us, or, hey, we said on this engagement survey that this wasn't important to us, or that we'd like to see it look different, and they didn't even listen to us. They didn't even follow up or do anything with it. And that's definitely not going to go over well.
Yeah, well, yeah, communication really is key when it comes to things like that. And so, Tiffany, you've worked a lot with small and mid-sized businesses. So what have you seen that works in terms of time off? And have you seen anything that really doesn't? Or like you said before, it really just depends. Even if it's all small businesses, does it really just depend on each individual? Or have you seen some type of trend with that?
I think, it's been interesting as I've been watching it, because I was always kind of under this assumption that people would move more towards unlimited. And there are some companies who very deliberately have chosen not to, because they don't feel like it's enough structure, or maybe they had some struggles when they did try to have that. And so they've kind of pulled it back. For me, at the end of the day, I think what matters is making sure there is a structure, that there's a solid plan. People know how to request it off. With unlimited, there's no like, oh, use it or lose it, right? Like there's a psychology behind that when people feel like they're going to lose out on something. And so is that something that's important to your employees? Are they going to value it? If you do, if you don't do unlimited, are they going to feel like, okay, well, good, then there's nothing I'm losing out on. But what's the difference if you're not going to take it anyway? Are you incentivizing people for pulling back away? Or are you sending them emails and asking them to do work when they're on vacation? Well, then there's no point to, having some type of structure. So if you create a culture where people really feel like when they're off, they're off. I am very strict about my time away. And so I think we are definitely seeing that people are disconnecting fully. You'll still have some people, especially in the upper echelons of the organization, if you will, who always feel like they have to be connected. Everyone needs me. I say they should take their time off too. I put it right in my out of office to remind people. I use it as a messaging tool to say, hey, I'm taking this time off. It's my birthday. In fact, my birthday is coming next week. So I'll say, I hope that you're doing something to celebrate too. There are different ways that you can be creative and have a lot of fun with that versus making people feel like, what's going to happen if I step away? Or feel like somebody else is going to take over their job or be more important and shine in the limelight when they leave. That's just not a good feeling. So I think we're definitely seeing more of a trend of people taking their time off truly as time off. I'm interested to continue watching where this unlimited PTO thing goes, because I think some companies rolled it out thinking it was the end all be all and found, maybe this doesn't work as much as we thought it would,
Mm-hmm.
or they're having to structure it a little bit differently, because the other piece is it always connects into other policies. I mentioned like a family leave policy or a parental leave policy. There are always intersections between our policies, and so in order to do it right, we have to do it equitably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's well, and I think maybe you can share your insights on this, but maybe with COVID, do you think in the last 2 years that shift from feeling like you need to be connected even when you're not working, when you're taking your time off, do you think that has shifted because of COVID or just in general? What do you think was the cause of that?
Yeah, I think people value their flexibility more. I think that being so connected when none of us had a choice of being hybrid, and we all had to, if we were grateful enough to be able to keep a role and the company was able to stay afloat, that we just were at home and literally there was no separation, right? I went and was doing some office tours last week, and I was like, I came back home and I didn't feel the need to pop my laptop open, and I was like, wow, you forget what that feeling is like, and how it separates when you actually leave your home to go to work. And so I think there's, an element of a psychology with that too for people that helps them pull away, that helps them create those boundaries. People definitely value their time at home with their loved ones. And people went through some very dark times that they were grateful to be able to be home, and they were able to feel like they could step away, but that the work was still getting done. And at the end of the day, that's what it should be. We're producing for customers and for the company if we're getting our things done. That doesn't mean we still can't have some balance in our life, because if your people are fried out, they're not going to be engaged in the work they're doing. They might be bored with the work they're doing. They might feel like you don't care about them as a person. Guess what? Now they leave. So it doesn't matter how much PTO you give, because now you're not an employer of choice. You've ruined your employer brand. And I see that happen sometimes. But I definitely think we value our time off differently. But I do think it's helped some people, unfortunately, I don't even know if help's the right word, but it's caused some people to feel like they have to be connected round the clock. The computer's sitting right there staring at me right in the other room, or it never seems to turn off. I'm guilty of it too at times. And so creating healthy boundaries for yourself, and as a leader, modeling that behavior. If we don't do that for our employees, my intern who's starting, for instance, she has a big family celebration that they're doing. And she's like, well, I can work remotely the week before. And I'm like, nope, we'll start you later. I value family time, and I have to model that for her to let her know that that's okay. And so these are things that we can do and should be doing as leaders, or there's naturally this power dynamic where people are going to feel like they have to be on, or it's my boss, so I have to answer this email right now because they sent it at 11 p.m., right? Like classic. You have to tell people and be explicit that I might be sending it at 11 p.m., but that doesn't mean I expect you to respond to it. And for as much as we say that, employees still feel like they have to do it, or they'll push other work aside and maybe not know how to balance all that, which causes all the stress and burnout. And now they really need a vacation, right? So
yeah, it's I think it's easy for someone who is who manages a team to say, oh, just because I'm emailing you at this time doesn't mean you have to read it, but there's still that pressure that you should be working if they're working. So I think it's important for leaders to remember that, and to lead by example, right? Not just say what they think should happen. But I think it's so true what you were saying during COVID, especially being at home all the time. During those first few months, we didn't really have a choice to leave and live our lives. It was just everything was in one place. So I'm sure so many people around the world struggled with separating the two, home versus work. And still, some people are still struggling, but then some people have woken up and said, wait, I need to separate it, or else I'm going to be burned out, exhausted, and stressed. So it's something that seems to be really shaping a lot of company cultures and individual people as well.
There's something to be said for leaving work at work. So which isn't always easy, and even when we're not working, sometimes it's taking up space in our head. And One thing that can't be, I mentioned mental health earlier, and I've had some struggles in the past because of being burnt out or because of the work culture not being toxic, frankly, or feeling all this pressure, especially around COVID. Leaders just have had such different pressures and expectations and decisions, really, really tough decisions that employees don't always love. And so being able to disconnect and having that and feeling like you're in a psychologically safe environment is really, really critical, when you're looking at shaping your policies and what people value. People need time off to be able to, maybe they do need to go get counseling or they're going through something. I thank goodness that when I lost my father, I worked for a people first company who was like, take the time you need, come back when you're ready, because that's a tough time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that leads me to my next question, because I wanted to say, in your experience, have you worked with companies that kind of taught you what you want to be as a leader? Like you said, with your intern, prioritize those family events and you don't always have to be working remotely. It's okay to take that time off. So when you were working, in that situation where they said, take your time, do what you need to do. Are there any other experiences that you've had that taught you how you want to be as a leader, leading your intern or leading people on your team?
Yeah, what a powerful question. Thank you for that invitation.
Yeah.
I think I'm really blessed with, I've had some not great situations, but I look at the ones that I've had that are really impactful. I've had great mentors, people like the company I described who said, just do what you need to do. They were very people first and really wanted to make sure that everyone was taking the time they needed with their family. They knew I loved to travel, so they allowed that. And I was able to do that within the time that I had. They had a pretty generous vacation policy too. But that's where you know what's expected of you and you kind of run with that. I think, also having leaders who had empathy and who could be vulnerable, or maybe they weren't as vulnerable as I was, but they were empathetic to the situation that I may be going through, whether it was like family or I was having a work struggle that, they could help me navigate. Then those are things that I've picked up. Or the manager who says like, hey, I'm going to send this at 11 p.m., but I don't expect you to answer it. But because you've built a great relationship and you've watched them model it, and you haven't answered that email at 11 p.m. and you didn't get, you weren't in trouble, and nothing else shifted the next day. It really makes a difference in an employee's, throughout their employee life cycle. And I think, we need to be doing more of that these days, especially with the great resignation upon us, and just really latching on to helping to support our employees and develop them. And that's really the role of the leader. And so that includes things like helping to shape policy, and not because it's self-serving to us, but because it's really going to help shape that employee in their development and the company's culture.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of talking about that, a little bit different, but in the US, we have this culture of, the workaholic, and I think we're starting to shift away from that, kind of what we were saying with COVID. We're waking up and realizing that we need to have our time. We need to give ourselves time to be better at work and be more productive and succeed in what we want to do. So do you see any changes in regard to that workaholic culture that, and I think I shared with you also that in 2020, I think it was 33% of PTO was left unused by Americans, which to me is crazy. So maybe there's some type of shift away from that workaholic culture. What do you see with that?
Yeah, I think you're seeing people start to get creative. Well, one, because employees are starting to force and demand that we need some more flexibility, and companies aren't getting away with just saying, nope, you gotta be here, you have to be in your seat 40 hours a week. And that just does not work for people anymore, because they're like, hey, wait a minute, I just did this for 2 years and now you're telling me that I need to be here. We figured out a way to make this work. And here's the other piece, and this just like really grinds my gears, because companies will say that, and yet it's not that the person's not there. It's that your systems don't work. You don't have a good infrastructure. You're not communicating. Maybe people don't have the right tools. Maybe the leadership is poor. I mean, I've seen every flavor of everything. I've been in HR 14 years, and throughout COVID, things have shifted a lot. We see this like flexibility moving away, and so people aren't taking their PTO because they maybe don't know how to use it, or they don't know how it works, or you have a really complicated policy. I helped a client recently to untangle it because people weren't really using it because they thought like, well, I don't really know like how to use it. It was complicated, and good on that employer for recognizing that to untangle it. But 33% is a lot. People are definitely, we're not working the ways that we were before. Some people are like, okay, can we go to a 4-day work week? Or even when you look at dress code, that looks different to people. I just had that conversation. Well, it's been ongoing. But last week, someone said to me, like, my wardrobe looks different than it did before. Because why wouldn't it? Why do we have to be so buttoned up? And I'll walk into client sites and I'm like, oh, I see a lot more jeans these days. And then, and then I'm going, sometimes in jeans to my client site. So it's really, even when you're at work, feeling like you can have that more relaxed environment, because even when you're not taking time off, you can have a little time off in your head, maybe because you feel like it's more casual and it's not so serious, and that we can still have fun at work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like you pointed out, it's not just about those types of benefits, those policies like unlimited PTO, but there are so many little pieces that contribute to how we feel in an organization and how we feel about the company culture, and it all ties together really. So it's really interesting to see that perspective too. And I think we are seeing that change, right? Like not just those policies, but also, like you said, dress code and being a little bit more casual is really nice to see that shift. And one other question I had for you, Tiffany, is tying it all back to the unlimited PTO. Do you think that there should be some other type of name that we should call it? Because unlimited PTO is a little bit open-ended, right? So what do you think? Is there some other name that we should be calling this, like flexible PTO or something? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm a fan of just PTO, right? Like paid time off, and establishing your culture and your policy around that. Like, what exactly does it mean? Because whether it's unlimited or not, we still have to tell people what it is, why it came to be, how they're supposed to use it, how do you request time off, if it's not unlimited, when do you need to use it by, or are you going to use it? Because the other piece is that people are on different fiscal years as well. But of course, there's a tracking piece. People like the unlimited because if it's your HR, your payroll, whoever's managing that piece, some managers are managing that, it's less administratively burdensome for them. But there still has to be some kind of mechanism in there. And there are different laws, right, that we have to make sure that we adhere to. So you have to be very planful and careful when you are crafting that policy to make sure you're not violating laws, but also that you're keeping your employees happy. So, even flexible PTO is probably better than unlimited, because if we're really honest, it's probably never going to be unlimited.
Yeah. Yeah, but I like the idea of just calling it PTO and really adapting it around who you are as a company, right? Because that's what it's all about. Even if two companies have the same policy, it could look a little bit different depending on how the company is from inside. So really, really useful information, Tiffany, and really cool to hear your perspective as well. Is there anything else you wanted to share or mention about the topic in general?
I think just, in general, making sure that your policies that you create are reflective of the employees that work within the organization, and that you're being people first, and really looking at it not so much from the organizational perspective of what can we gain. And of course, there's going to be compliance pieces and legal pieces, and we have to manage some risk within that. But at the same time, these are people they're working for us. They are our greatest asset. So how do we keep them engaged and happy and make sure, as I describe always, that we're not ruining them at the end of the day, that they go home whole and as whole beings, not that, they feel all the stress and pressure and then they're burnt out. And because the reality is, no matter what structure we have, if we burn our people out at the end of the day, or if they don't feel like we value them, they're not going to be engaged. So how productive is a disengaged employee? Not very productive. And especially if they're in a client-facing role, not going to be great for you. And then you're going to lose them. Either because the organization is going to make a decision or that person's going to make a decision, depending on the circumstances. And retention is something we want to be making sure we're managing. Turnover is very, very expensive. And some companies, unfortunately, because of their culture or not listening to their employees or wanting to be so rigid and hang in there. So that's the other piece I'd say is be agile, be flexible, and make sure that your policies move with the people who are in your organization. And certainly check out what your competitors are doing, but don't just try to overlay that to your own culture. You have to establish your own culture and brand. So those are probably some of the key things that I would say. And I would say have a policy, certainly, right? Over not having one, and try it on, see how it feels. And it doesn't mean you're stuck with it either. And that's why stores have return policies, right? We don't like everything that we pick up. So I think it's very, very important to share that piece as well. Because I think people think, oh, what will they think? They're going to think that we didn't know what we were doing, or and that's not always the case. People will respect you giving them the why and really communicating over just doing it just because, right? That's one trend that we've seen, like the status quo is not flying anymore. So you may as well try on something new.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tiffany, thanks so much for being with us today on this episode of On Board. It was really nice to hear your perspective and get your insights. So it was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. What a great conversation.
Of course. Thank you.